I never thought moving into a new apartment could turn into one of those moments that stick with you forever, but here we are. It was one of those days where everything feels just a little off, but you tell yourself it's fine because, well, moving please mess, right? I was hauling boxes up 3 flights of stairs in this cramped walk-up in Brooklyn, cursing every step, when this guy from the building stopped by to help. Total stranger, but he just showed up like he'd read my mind. That's how it started. I'd just moved into this tiny one-bedroom on the edge of Williamsburg, a place I'd spent months hunting for between bad Craigslist ads and overpriced studio hell, the kind of place where the kitchen was basically a corner and the living room was barely big enough for a bed. But it was mine, and that was enough. I wasn't expecting much except a few weeks of chaos unpacking and trying to figure out how to live on my own without the usual noise from roommates or my family hovering. So I'm struggling to rustle a giant box labeled books and random crap up the stairs when this guy shows up. He's maybe late 20s, with a casual vibe, worn jeans, a black hoodie, and this kind of easy smile that made you feel like you'd known him longer than 5 seconds. He introduced himself as Max and said he lived down the hall. I was half expecting him to just nod and go on his way, but instead he grabbed the box and started hauling it up with me. We fell into this easy rhythm, joking about how moving's the worst type of workout, and how I must be crazy to do it solo. Then he asked where I was from. That's when I started to realize maybe this wasn't just a random help a neighbor thing. There was something about the way he looked at me, like he was really trying to figure me out. After a while, when we were taking a break in the hallway, he said something that caught me totally off guard. He asked straight up, "Have you ever been with a guy before, like no build-up or anything?" Just that question, hanging there in the hallway between my old life and whatever this new one was about to be. I froze for a second, trying to read if he was joking or serious. But his eyes were genuine, like he wanted to know, not just making small talk. And honestly, I wasn't sure how to answer. Because, yeah, I'd thought about it. I'd wondered what it would feel like, if it would ever be something real. But I'd never actually said it out loud to anyone in my real life. Not even to myself. That moment, standing there with the box half unpacked, and Max watching me like he could see right through all the walls I'd built, felt like a line I'd been edging up to for years but never crossed. And somehow, I knew this wasn't just about moving boxes anymore. Something else was starting to move too. I cleared my throat, feeling suddenly self-conscious in this narrow hallway that smelled faintly of old carpet and fresh paint. I guess I've thought about it, I said, trying to sound casual. But not really, no. It felt weird admitting it out loud, like spilling a secret I wasn't even sure I was ready to own. Max nodded slowly, like he understood more than I was saying. That's fair. Not everyone has figured it out yet. He smiled again, but this time it wasn't the easy, casual grin from before. It was softer, maybe a little nervous, like he was sharing something too. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but at the same time I was grateful for the pause. We stood there for a moment, just breathing in the quiet. It was the kind of silence that didn't need filling, the kind that felt like permission. "So, I'm Max," he said after a beat, like changing the subject but really not. "And if you ever want to talk about that stuff, or anything else, I'm around." There was a hint of hope in his voice that caught me off guard, like he wasn't just offering help moving boxes anymore, but something bigger. I smiled back, a little awkward but genuine. "Thanks, Max, I appreciate that," and honestly, I did. It was the kind of offer you don't expect from a stranger, but desperately need sometimes. We finished hauling the last few boxes up, and I invited him inside to grab a drink. Just water, but it felt like the most civilized thing I could offer after the mini-workout. His apartment was just down the hall, small but neat, with a few plants and a record player in the corner. We talked about music, the neighborhood, and the usual stuff people say when they're trying to figure out if they want to keep talking. Over the next couple of days, Max kept popping up. Sometimes it was just to check if I needed help with something. Other times he'd swing by with a pizza or a bottle of wine. We settled into this weird, easy rhythm where I'd be unpacking and he'd be there, joking, teasing, pushing me out of my comfort zone without even trying. One night, after a few glasses of wine and a playlist that somehow mixed everything from indie rock to old school R&B, I found myself opening up a little more than usual. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was Max's way of listening that made me feel safe. I told him about all the stuff I'd never said out loud. The confusion, the guilt, the moments where I caught myself wondering what it would be like to be with a guy, but then shutting it down because I hadn't figured out how to be that guy in real life. He didn't judge. He just nodded, like he'd been there too, like he understood how messy and confusing it could be. "I get it," he said quietly. "It's not easy, figuring out who you really are, especially when you don't have a map." Then he looked at me, eyes steady. "But you don't have to do it alone." I wanted to tell him I wasn't sure if I was ready for any of this, that I was scared of what it might mean for me. But instead, I just nodded, because in that moment, it felt less scary to have someone beside me. A few nights later, we ended up sitting on my tiny balcony, the city lights flickering below us. The air was cool, the kind that makes your breath visible in little puffs. And for once, my mind wasn't racing with all the noise I usually carried around. Max reached over and brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead. "You don't have to rush anything," he said. "Just be honest with yourself. That's all that matters." I looked at him, really looked at him, and something inside me shifted. There was warmth there, genuine and steady, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I could let my guard down. "Thanks for helping me move in," I said, the words feeling heavier than they should. "For asking the hard questions." He smiled, the same easy smile from that first day, but now it felt like an invitation, not just a greeting. "Anytime," he said. "Maybe next time you can tell me the answer to that question." And just like that, the hallway where it all started seemed a little less daunting. Because maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something I never expected, but kinda hoped for. After that night on the balcony, things between Max and me settled into a kind of comfortable rhythm. Not quite a routine, but a steady back and forth that I didn't realize I'd been missing. He'd stop by after work, sometimes carrying coffee or snacks, and we'd hang out in my cramped living room talking about everything and nothing. I still hadn't given him a straight answer to that question, "Have you ever been with a guy?" But it no longer felt like a looming test. Instead, it was more like a quiet invitation, hovering at the edge of our conversations, waiting for the right moment. One weekend, Max invited me out to a small bar a few blocks away. He said it was his favorite spot for live music and cheap drinks. I was hesitant at first. Bars and crowds were still a little intimidating, but I agreed. Part of me wanted to see if I could step outside the box I'd been living in for years. The place was cozy, dimly lit, with a few people scattered around tables and a tiny stage where a local band was setting up. Max ordered us 2 beers, and we found a spot near the back. The music started, soft vocals, a slow guitar, and I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. We talked about his job as a graphic designer, how he'd ended up in the neighborhood, and the little things that made him smile. I opened up more than I expected, about my own work, my family, and the awkwardness I felt living alone for the first time. At one point, Max reached over and brushed a hand along mine, a light touch that sent a jolt through me. I looked at him, heart suddenly racing, and he just smiled, a quiet, shy smile that made my stomach flip. "Hey," he said softly. "No pressure. I just like being here with you." I nodded, words failing me for once. The fact that he said it so casually, as if it was the most normal thing in the world, made it feel less terrifying. Later, as the night went on and more people showed up, we moved closer to the stage. The band played a slow song, and Max pulled me into a dance. I was terrible, awkward feet, fumbling hands, but he didn't care. He held me steady, his eyes locked on mine, and in that moment, I forgot about all the fears and doubts. After we left the bar, walking back through the quiet streets, Max asked again, but softer this time, "So, have you ever been with a guy?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question settle over me like a warm blanket. "No," I admitted. "Not yet." He smiled, and it wasn't pity or judgment. It was something like relief. "That's okay. We can figure it out together if you want." That was the moment I realized just how much I wanted to. The idea of exploring this part of myself with someone who was patient and kind made the whole thing less scary. Over the next few weeks, Max and I started spending more time together. Sometimes we'd cook dinner in my tiny kitchen, laughing over burnt pasta or failed attempts at fancy tool tales. Other times, we'd just sit on the couch, sharing stories and dreams. One evening, after a lazy Sunday brunch at a nearby cafe, we walked back to the apartment holding hands for the first time. It was a small gesture, but it felt huge to me. I kept glancing down at our fingers intertwined, amazed at how natural it felt. That night, as we sat on my bed watching some dumb comedy, Max leaned over and kissed me. Just a gentle, tentative kiss that made my heart race and my mind spin. When we pulled apart, he looked at me with those steady eyes and said, "You don't have to say anything right now. Just know I'm here." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I wasn't sure where this was going, or if I was ready for all the changes that came with it, but for the first time, I didn't want to run away. Moving into that apartment had been the start of something new, but meeting Max turned out to be the beginning of something real. Something that felt like home. That night after our first kiss, everything felt like it was suspended in this strange, sweet limbo. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves twisting together in my stomach. It wasn't just the kiss, it was what it represented, the beginning of something I'd kept tucked away for so long that it almost felt unreal. The next morning, I woke up to the sunlight filtering through the blinds, and my phone buzzing with a message from Max. "Coffee later? I know a place with the best croissants." I smiled like a dumb idiot and texted back, "Sounds perfect." When we met up, the air was crisp but not cold, and the city was buzzing in that early weekend way. People walking dogs, kids playing, the usual Brooklyn symphony of sirens and chatter. We grabbed our coffee and croissants, then found a bench in a small park nearby. The way Max looked at me over his cup made my heart beat a little faster. So he said, biting into his pastry, "How are you feeling about everything? Us?" I hesitated. Honestly, it's scary. But good scary, if that makes sense. He laughed. Makes total sense. We talked about what this meant to each of us, about past relationships, what we wanted, and what we were scared of. I told him about the walls I'd built up around myself, and how I wasn't used to letting anyone in like this. Max shared some of his own stories, the awkward moments, the doubts he'd faced, and the small victories that made it all worth it. There was this moment when he said, "I'm not looking for perfect. I just want to be with someone real." And I realized that's what I wanted too, someone who saw me for who I really was, without all the pretending or second-guessing. After that, things started shifting naturally. We spent more time together, movie nights, walks in the park, lazy mornings with pancakes burnt to a crisp but eaten anyway. With each passing day, the fears loosened their grip, replaced by a growing sense of belonging. One evening, after a late dinner at his place, Max turned to me with a serious look. "Can I ask you something a little bigger?" he said. I nodded, suddenly nervous again. "Have you thought about telling your family? About us?" The question hit harder than I expected. My family was traditional, close-knit, and while I'd never been outright rejected by them, I knew they had their own ideas about who I should be. The thought of telling them scared me more than I cared to admit. "I don't know," I confessed. "I'm still figuring out how to be honest with myself, let alone with them." Max reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "You don't have to do it until you're ready. But when you are, I'll be here." I felt a lump in my throat. It was the kind of support I'd longed for but never dared to ask for. In that quiet moment, I realized Max wasn't just helping me move boxes or sharing a drink. He was helping me move through life, helping me carry the weight of my own doubts. Weeks turned into months, and our relationship deepened. There were awkward moments, me fumbling my words, him patiently waiting, moments of doubt and insecurity, and moments of pure, unfiltered joy. We learned each other's rhythms, quirks, and secrets. One cold night, bundled up under a shared blanket in my tiny living room, Max looked at me and said, "You've changed a lot since you moved in." "I think you're the reason," I said, voice soft. He smiled, eyes sparkling. "Glad to hear it." Then, without warning, he leaned in and kissed me again, this time with more certainty, like we'd crossed some invisible line together. In that kiss, I felt all the fear and hesitation melt away, replaced by something warm and steady. Something real. Looking back, it was crazy to think how a simple offer to help move boxes led to all of this. How a question about whether I'd ever been with a guy became the key to unlocking parts of myself I'd kept hidden. And honestly, I'm still figuring it all out. But with Max by my side, for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid to see where it goes. I guess it's fair to say that once Max and I got past that initial awkwardness, things moved faster than I expected. Not in a jumping headfirst kind of way, but in the slow unfolding of something I never thought I'd let myself have. There was comfort in the little routines we built, like trading playlists, sharing bad jokes, and arguing over who made the better coffee in the morning. Those moments felt normal, peaceful, and honestly a little bit magical. One chilly Thursday evening, a few months after that slow dance at the bar, Max invited me over for dinner. His place was cozy, walls lined with framed posters from concerts he'd been to, a small collection of plants thriving on the windowsill. The smell of garlic and something else delicious greeted me at the door. "I hope you're hungry," he said, grinning as he pulled a cast-iron skillet off the stove. We sat down to eat with the city lights twinkling beyond the window. Somehow, between bites of the pasta he'd cooked and sips of wine, we drifted into a deeper, quieter conversation. "Do you ever think about what it'd be like, telling people? Like, your friends or family?" Max asked, his fingers tracing patterns on the table. I swallowed hard. Honestly, I hadn't told many people. A few close friends had vague hints, but my family? No way. I wasn't ready to deal with their questions, the disappointment I imagined in their eyes, or the awkward silences at holiday dinners. "Not really," I admitted. "I'm scared of what might change." Max nodded, eyes thoughtful. "Yeah, it's scary. But sometimes, keeping things inside can feel even scarier." The way he said it made me feel less alone. Like he understood the weight I was carrying without me having to say it all. After dinner, we ended up on the couch, the kind of comfortable silence wrapping around us like a blanket. Max leaned his head on my shoulder, and I felt my heart slow down, steady itself. That night, as I walked home under the flickering streetlights, I couldn't shake the feeling that my old life and this new one were converging, and I didn't have to be afraid anymore. But of course, life isn't all neat moments and perfect timing. A few weeks later, I found myself caught off guard when my sister called. She wanted to visit, just to see the new place and catch up. I wasn't sure how to prepare. I hadn't told her about Max, hadn't told anyone really. The day she arrived, I was pacing around like a nervous wreck, trying to clean the apartment like a maniac. When she finally stepped inside, she smiled warmly, but I could tell she noticed something different. Maybe it was the second coffee cup on the counter, or the way I kept glancing at my phone. After a while, she asked gently, "So, is there someone special around here I should know about?" My stomach twisted. I tried to deflect, but then I looked at her, really looked, and I realized I didn't want to keep hiding. "I do," I said quietly. "His name's Max." She smiled, relief washing over her face. "I'm glad you told me." That conversation opened a door I hadn't dared to knock on before. Over the next few visits, I introduced Max to my family, slowly and carefully. Some reactions were what I expected. Some awkward questions, a few raised eyebrows. But mostly, I was met with support I hadn't imagined. One night, after a particularly long day of work and family dinners, Max and I sat on the fire escape, looking out over the city skyline. "You handled all that way better than I thought you would," he said, nudging my shoulder. I laughed softly. "I had you in my corner," he grinned. "Always." That moment felt like a turning point. Like I'd crossed some invisible line from uncertainty to something more solid. It wasn't perfect. There were still days when doubt crept in, or when I felt overwhelmed, but I was no longer alone. As winter turned to spring, Max and I kept building. We planned little trips, tried new restaurants, and even started talking about what together could mean for us. One afternoon, while we were sprawled out in a park, soaking up the sun, Max turned to me with that easy smile of his and said, "You know, I'm really lucky I helped you move in that day." I smiled back, the memory of those first awkward moments still vivid but softened by everything that came after. "Yeah, me too." And honestly, I think that's what makes this whole thing worth it. The unexpected moments that turn into something real. The slow, messy, beautiful process of finding someone who sees you and wants to stick around, who knew a few boxes and a simple question could start all of this. Some days I still can't believe how much has changed since Max helped me move in. It's wild to think that a random act of kindness from a neighbor could turn into this whole new chapter of my life. But, like with all things worth having, it's not been without its bumps. One rainy Wednesday evening, about 6 months after I'd settled into the apartment and started dating Max, I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I got this text from my best friend Ryan. He asked if I wanted to grab a drink. Normally, I'd say yes in a heartbeat, but tonight, something about it made me hesitate. I hadn't told Ryan about Max yet, and the thought of bringing up my new life felt like walking into a minefield. Still, I figured it was time. So I texted back, "Yeah, let's meet. There's something I want to tell you." We ended up at this dimly lit bar a few blocks from my place. Ryan was the same old Ryan. Loud laugh, easy smile. But when I mentioned Max, his expression shifted just a little, like he wasn't sure what to say. "So you're seeing a guy?" he asked, trying to keep it casual. "Yeah," I said, watching his reaction. "I've been seeing Max for a while." There was a beat of silence before he replied, "Okay, that's cool." But I could tell it wasn't just cool. There was something else under the surface. Surprise, maybe some confusion. We talked for a bit longer, and I could feel the distance creeping in, the uncertainty of where this all fit into the puzzle of my old life and new one. Ryan was supportive, but I knew this was going to take time. On the way home, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. It's strange how one conversation can feel like a victory and a setback at the same time. When I got to my apartment, Max was waiting by the door with that familiar smile, like he'd been expecting me. I dropped my keys on the table, flopped onto the couch, and told him about the night. He listened, silent at first, then said, "That's a start. Sometimes people need time to catch up. But you did the hard part, being honest." His words settled over me like a balm. It wasn't about rushing anyone or forcing acceptance. It was about being true to myself and letting others find their way. A few weeks later, Max surprised me with tickets to a small theater show, something quirky and offbeat that he said reminded him of me. We laughed through the performance, sitting close, sharing popcorn, and for the first time I felt like I was showing up as my whole self, not just the parts one thought were safe. After the show, walking back through the quiet streets, Max stopped and looked at me, eyes bright with that mix of nervousness and hope. "I want you to meet my friends," he said. I hesitated. Meeting friends felt like the next big step, and part of me panicked at the thought of being out there for the world to see. But then he reached out, took my hand, and squeezed it gently. "Only if you want to." That night was a turning point. Max's friends were warm and welcoming, and they didn't bat an eye at us as a couple. It felt like stepping into a new circle where I belonged. From there, the walls I'd built started to crumble just a little more each day. Some days were messy, moments of doubt, awkward conversations, or the ever-present fear that I might lose the people I loved. But more often, there were moments of joy. Lazy Sunday mornings with Max's head on my chest, spontaneous road trips, the comfort of a hand in mine during a crowded subway ride. One afternoon, as we sat in Central Park watching people pass by, Max turned to me and said, "I'm proud of how far you've come." I smiled, heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you." He shrugged like it was no big deal, but I knew better. He'd been my anchor through it all. Looking back, it's crazy how one simple question, "Have you ever been with a guy?" opened the door to everything. It forced me to confront parts of myself I'd hidden, and to take chances I never thought I'd take. I don't know exactly what the future holds, but with Max, I'm ready to find out, because sometimes the most unexpected moments turn out to be the ones that change your life. It wasn't a grand gesture or some perfect moment that made me realize I was in it, really in it, with Max. It was more like a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where the city hums softly outside and everything feels just right. We were sitting on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and a few stray plants that Max had insisted would brighten up the place. He was sipping on his third cup of coffee, and I was scrolling idly through my phone, but neither of us felt the need to fill the silence. At some point, Max reached over and took my hand. Just that simple touch, warm, familiar, and steady, felt like home. I looked at him and saw that same easy smile I'd fallen for months ago, but now it was mixed with something deeper, something that told me he was as committed to this as I was. "I'm glad you asked me that question," I said softly, remembering the hallway, the boxes, and that first unexpected moment. He laughed, eyes crinkling at the corners. "I was nervous as hell when I did." "Me too," I admitted. "But I'm glad you did." There was no need for fireworks or dramatic confessions. Just two people, holding hands, figuring it out together. Looking back, I realized how far I'd come. From hiding parts of myself, scared and unsure, to building a life where honesty wasn't a burden but a gift. Max didn't just help me move into an apartment. He helped me move into myself. And maybe that's what love is at its best. Not a whirlwind or a perfect fairy tale, but a steady presence that makes you want to be braver, kinder, and more real. As I squeezed Max's hand, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet confidence that, whatever comes next, we'll face it side by side. And honestly, that feels more than enough.